It is the Everton Byline. We are back. There are just under 2 days until Everton play a football match again by the time people listen to or watch this. Rejoice, Paddy, because it feels excited and so keen for an Anfield Derby to come along. But my gosh, it feels like it's been a long time, doesn't it? The last 2.5 weeks.
That's a positive step forward, because where we've got to with Everton in recent years is that every break is a period of solace. So it would be, this is 2.5 weeks without Everton, I'm made up. I'll just go off and forget about them for 2.5 weeks. But now, when you say stuff like this, you realise that the tide is starting to turn a bit. We're a bit more optimistic maybe about football coming back and watching Everton. I think that's fundamentally a positive thing.
This is growth. Like Everton, we as Everton's a football club, as the accounts might show a little bit later in the podcast. Paddy's not sure about that. But as Everton as a football club is growing and blossoming, we as fans and reporters are growing and blossoming as well. Bring on the Reds. I'm ready for it. Just to see 11 lads in blue kicking a ball around again. I am excited, and I feel sorry for yourself and other writers certainly who cover the Blues in these junctures, because it's just trying to find ideas and fresh content to come up with when nothing has happened. Certainly before today, because me and you were talking over the weekend about what we're going to talk about, and it was a bit like head scratching time. But thankfully, Everton have done something, which we will get stuck into a little bit later on. Let's go through all our usual stuff before we get stuck into those free topics today. We are sponsored by the Bridewell. It's going to get hot this week. And if you're out on Saturday for the match as well, full day on the ale, potentially on Saturday, great spot to sit and do some day drinking after the footy. So do go and check it out if you're in town on Saturday. If you're regular in Liverpool, or you're just for the game at the weekend as well. If you watch us on YouTube, and you can see that logo in the top right-hand corner, you'll be able to see the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. You can click that to subscribe to all of our content. You can hit like, or you can leave us a comment on anything we've been talking about today. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else, do leave us a rating, do leave us a review. And it's less than 4 weeks, Paddy, until the London Marathon. I did my longest training run at the weekend, so I'm a bit sore today. But if you'd like to sponsor me in that, raising money for Alder Hay Children's Charity, obviously a great cause here in the city, you can do so at the link below. So do click on that, and all the support is welcome and might be required on the day itself. So I appreciate anyone who's donated already. Let's get stuck into it then, Paddy. Monday afternoon, 12:30, Everton released their accounts on the website. I think we kind of knew this was coming. I think it's the end of the financial year at the end of this week. But clubs were looking to file them today. A lot of clubs have left them till last minute. I think Everton were actually ahead of a lot of the peers for a change when it comes to this, but they dropped on the website at 12:30. Just some of their headline numbers before we delve into it in a bit more detail. So Everton recorded a 14.7 million increase in turnover to 186.9 million, and that's a loss of 53.2 million for the financial period for the 2023-24 season. The results for the period ending the 30th of June 2024 show a reduction in reported losses, which is down from 89.1 million in 22-23, outlining, to quote Everton on their website, a year of financial progress. And just a couple of headline bits as well. Everton continued funding the development of the new stadium, which incurred capital costs of 312.7 million compared to 210.9 million in the previous year. Commercially, there's been some growth in regards to sponsorship, advertising, and merchandising revenue, increased to 21.6 million, which is 2.4 million more than the previous term. And the other one, I think, as well, I don't know if you'd agree, which I think was potentially significant, is the wages to turnover ratio, which fell from 89% to 81%, which takes into consideration outsourcing retail, catering operations. But it's, again, to quote Everton on this one, demonstrates the club's commitment to financial sustainability whilst maintaining a competitive squad. So I think people might look at that from sort of outside Everton and see that number and think Everton have lost money again, which is obviously not ideal. But I think it's probably important to stress that this is for the previous term, which is before the Freaking Group came in and obviously have helped Everton get on a shorter financial footing since. And like I said, while it's not good to lose that amount over the course of the year, and it sort of points to a regime which was not necessarily proficient in these types of things, within the report, there are good things and there are positive signs that obviously things are on an upward trajectory in terms of trend, and that the Freaking Group have already made some pretty substantial changes to Everton, which we've got a bit more colour and detail of now.
Yeah, I would say there's more positive than negative in the accounts. And that's quite remarkable when you outline, as you did, the extent of the loss. Like £53 million loss it's a lot of money. And that will also then have to be weighed against the PSR regulations. That will be a millstone round Everton's neck when they attempt to comply in future windows. I mean, we knew for starters, didn't we, that Everton were compliant for the period that was reported on Monday, so that those accounts were for last season, ending in June, at the end of June. So we knew Everton were compliant, so there were going to be no great shakes there. Because of that, then you can kind of estimate that the losses are going to have gone down from 89 million, and as they were in the 50s this time. So there is some progress being made there. And I mean, certainly I wouldn't want to get into a habit of celebrating losses, because this is still, if we're being honest, too much money for the club to be losing year on year. But they've trended in the right direction again, which they deserve some credit for. The positive, I think there are positives and negatives. The big negative was, in my opinion, the steep increase in debt. So they went from, I think it was about 330 million the year previous to 570-ish in terms of debt. And there you can see they were building the new stadium, trying to get this thing done, and incurred more costs during if we're being honest, a particularly fraught financial period for the club, where they were trying to get new owners in and taking on high interest loans and all this kind of stuff. The flip side of that, and the positive here, is that a lot of these conclusions offer a moment in time, where the accounts were submitted a while ago. They're for last season, and since then we've had developments that kind of negate some of what we've seen within those accounts. So the best example I can give is that net debt figure. I mean, TFG came in more or less on day one and refinanced that debt, repaid it. So the debt total itself is smaller now. We don't have the exact numbers, but it'll be much smaller than 570 million. And they will be on much more favourable long-term rates, as we've discussed previously on this pod. So we're kind of looking at a snapshot in time, and things have already evolved quite significantly, and I would say have evolved in a positive sense for the club because of TFG's presence. And there's a load in the accounts on how TFG, since that financial window ended, have made contributions that have helped safeguard effectively the future of the club. Some of the things we know about: secured refinancing packages with JP Morgan. I think one of the lines in there that people maybe won't have seen yet is they've secured a 5-year rolling credit agreement as well with JP Morgan to provide kind of working capital on each year. For Everton, that was always done with rights and media funding. And that, I mean, for most people, that will have been seen as a negative, kind of opaque, shady, Cheshire-based lender and on pretty high interest rates. So Everton have gone to a different lender and have got what we're told are more favourable kind of considerations there, more favourable rates. So I think there's a load in here, load of stuff in here, but what we can see is that certainly TFG coming in has helped stabilise the financial side of the club. I think it was quite clear in terms of the tone from the directors who have to write in the accounts and also the auditors, Crow, that they both felt a lot more secure with where the club was right now as a result of TFG's presence. And we'll see some of that reflected in future accounts, I suppose. So I'm kind of sat here thinking, like, these are quite odd to analyse. Like, you've got all this money that was debt at a certain point in time before July. But since then, we've had a takeover and kind of loads of things have happened. What I can see is a positive trajectory under TFG, and I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think the one sort of like the starkest thing for me, and I will openly admit, and I have on this podcast been a novice in this sort of thing. Like the very first thing that I did when the accounts came on the website and that thing dropped was went straight to the section about a going concern, because I think, as you mentioned there, the auditors in the past have looked at Everton, and I can't think of the exact terminology, but in the past they've sort of said they have concerns about Everton continuing to operate as a business. I think last year they made reference to relegation if the club went down. And that was kind of the headline thing from the accounts then, in the sense that, my God, this is potentially very perilous. We are in a very bad situation. Obviously, the losses last year were a lot more as well. And if you look at it this year, the picture painted in that particular section, even on its own, which kind of just sums up the very it's all about us growing and blossoming at the start. I immediately went to the section which is like, is Everton in danger of going out of business or anything like that? Maybe not quite fully there, yeah. But even in that section, I think that's kind of a good snapshot, isn't it? Where it wasn't a portrayal of a football club in amazing, rude financial health, but it was a whole lot better than the situation we were in last year. And you'd like to think that after a year of all these changes coming into effect, which you mentioned there, obviously we have got more debt now, but it's been restructured and it's on a lot more manageable terms in regards to interest and paying it back. All these other little things in regards to transfers, the wages to turnover ratio. I think this to me just feels like it's one we'll ultimately look back on as a stepping stone, maybe in a year's time, when we've had a year of, potentially, further down the line, we've had another year of the stadium and all that kind of stuff. It's just a progress towards Everton being a normal functioning football club from a financial perspective, which is ultimately what we all wanted.
Yeah, well, I've often framed it in this way. Like, for the last 3 or 4 years, the club has been trying to survive, and I mean merely survive as an entity, not just as a Premier League outfit, but just as a club, full stop, period. So we can now move beyond that and back to a different period where actually people will start to invest again. But that will have to be married as well with a lot more business acumen, a lot more business sense, a lot better commercial deals. Like, I know you mentioned there that commercials rose by, I think it was about 2.4% if we're looking at sponsorships. But TFG, if they're going to make significant ground here, are going to have to get a stadium naming rights deal. They're going to have to get improved sponsorships, improved commercial deals. And that will take a bit of time to filter through. But that's the kind of stuff that improves your bottom line, reduces losses, and means that you've got more money to spend in the transfer market. So I think what we're seeing in these accounts, particularly in the notes about what TFG have done since they've came in, is a turning point. It's where the club hopefully stops going from being the basket case that was just straining to survive. It's starting to turn the corner with restructuring of debt and reduced debt and all that kind of stuff, and is now looking at how it can start to put building blocks in place for the future. And this has to be step one of many steps, but it is crucial that they've done this and they've kind of turned the corner so far in the way they have. So I mean that was the thing that came through for me. I was like, yeah, £50 million loss, that's not good. But then you read some of the comments from directors and from auditors and everyone else, and everybody 12 months on from those kind of doom-laden accounts that you referenced there, everyone's feeling a lot better about not just the short term, but also the long-term health of the club.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of bullish lines, and I think Colin Chong's bit in particular is he comes across as somebody who's very confident about the way in which the club's going, and I suppose there are material reasons as to why they will feel like that. Won't they? The match day revenue is going to go up massively. You've referenced there a couple of things in regards to the sponsorship opportunities that you've got. There's potentially going to be shows and concerts held background. There's the naming rights deal that's still to come along. Like these are things which are going to happen and are going to help improve Everton's financial situation going forward. And I suppose, like from my point of view, and just flipping this onto maybe the short term, do you look at these and think there's going to be any kind of real term impact in the summer in regards to meeting the PSR threshold? Do you look at these accounts because I think when the ones came out last summer, we all looked at them and thought someone's gonna go. And I mean that in terms of a big player. And obviously we ended up selling Amadou and Arden to Aston Villa, and he was the one who was kind of moved on along with a few other deals. But do you look at those numbers, because it is still ultimately a £50 million loss, and think that, obviously Jared Branthwaite's the one now, isn't he, that looks like the most obvious candidate? Do you look at those numbers and think that we might have to potentially sell a big player to meet the threshold again before June, the end of June, sorry?
Yeah, so I think that there obviously is a difference between a £50-odd million loss and a near £90 million loss, and that is reflected in the numbers, and I think will probably be reflected in the club's PSR position as well when it comes to staying below that £105 million limit over a 3-year period. Nothing I've seen today kind of changes probably where I've been, where people at the club have been when I've spoken to them about what needs to happen, because these accounts will have been common knowledge internally for a good while, and of course TFG had access to the books. The very early indications I always had, certainly before this, were that they would need to monitor the PSR position. It would need to be a consideration through to June the 30th, and it might be something similar to what happened last summer, maybe not quite as extreme in terms of the amount of players that need to go or the exact sum. I still think there's a small kind of lingering issue to resolve, and hopefully that is resolved pretty easily. I don't think anybody foresees it being a problem. I don't think anybody foresees it being a, God, we need to sell Jared Branthwaite here, otherwise we're not going to comply with PSR. I mean, that would be terrible in a number of ways. Like, nobody wants to lose Jared Branthwaite, but certainly nobody wants to lose him in those circumstances with your hands tied behind your back and everybody knowing, as I think Manchester United tried to do last summer, that Everton had to sell. And it's like, how far can we push this? Can we come in with a cheeky offer that they have to accept because there's no other eventuality? I think Everton, whatever happens with Branthwaite beyond that date, I actually think Everton will be looking to resolve this in different ways, and I don't think it requires anything of that magnitude.
There you go. Yeah, maybe through a few creative deals with Aston Villa again, where
we will see that. We will see that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're inevitable, aren't they? Like, I think clubs are going to do what they can to try and get around this. And yeah, I think you look back at last summer, and you're right about Branthwaite, and you think about the situation Everton were in then, which is obviously a lot worse than it is now from a purely financial perspective. And you just look at United in particular and think, you might have missed your chance, lads, in the sense that Everton are stronger financially. They're in a worse position themselves. Branthwaite may have better suitors. Like maybe that chance for United has ultimately passed them by. But no, it's like, cautious optimism, I think, is where I'm at with it now. Maybe have a proper look at it in a bit more detail over the last few days. People smarter than myself when it comes to all this sort of stuff, I've got to say, about the accounts and take it from there. But I
would also say that I think PSR has created another window within the wider summer window, and what we ended up with last summer and what clubs were reporting back was that it felt that there was like a June 30th deadline to hit for the financial year and for PSR, and then a much later one, obviously right at the end of the actual window itself. And I've got no reason to believe that will go away this time around. And you saw a whole merry-go-round of deals involving clubs. Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, Everton, Villa, Chelsea were involved in it, obviously, for a bit. United were kind of up against it with PSR for a while, but didn't do quite as much in that window. So I think we will see, not necessarily same from Everton, but I think just in general, I think we will see some more of those PSR deals. And I think clubs loosely then fall into one of two distinct categories. You either have like the predator clubs who know they're absolutely fine, like Tottenham and Brighton, who can just try and pick an opportunity where possible. I mean, like Brighton got Yankuba Minter, who Newcastle would never have wanted to sell for a really decent fee because of the PSR restrictions. Tottenham, I'm sure at some point would be able to do similar if they wanted. And then you got the other side of the predator clubs. You got like the prey clubs who are just there. They're trying to get business done. And clubs like Man United looked at Everton last summer and thought, we can pick at them here. We can pick up a really good deal. And that's where you don't want to be, obviously. So I don't think Everton are going to be desperate by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly not on the early indications. And things can obviously change. You can do commercial deals throughout the remainder of the season. Your league placing will affect PSR because of merit money. All these things can change. So it's no exact science right now. But I think Everton's position is slightly improved, I would say.
Yeah, and I think as well it's the actual amount that Everton lost from the points deductions. I pieced them my colleague Joe Thomas today, sort of looking at where Everton would have finished in the league if it wasn't for those deductions. So it cost them 8.5 million in total. Yeah. So that in itself, it's just one thing on top of another, isn't it? When it comes to those sorts of punishments.
Yeah, do you know the really bizarre thing about that as well is that if you look at the amount of games where Everton were picked for broadcasting, it was 23. And that was kind of up there, 6th or 7th in the league. And my argument here, in a really perverse way, is that because of the deduction and the scrutiny on Everton, they were selected for more live games than they would have been had they finished 12, 13, 14, and therefore received more broadcast payments than they ordinarily would have done in that season. And if you look actually at where their turnover comes, just to go back to the accounts, I think they were up about 50 million in terms of turnover. And there was about a 13 million raise in broadcast revenues. So in this really bizarre way, like it gives with one hand and it takes away with the other, or flip it on its head. And I do wonder whether Everton have actually, I mean, like that merit money would have been important in a different sense, I'm sure. But I wonder if like the fact that Everton was seen as this crisis club or this club that was fighting kind of an unjust sanction actually played into their hands in terms of a narrative. Like probably where you don't want to be for the broadcasters is this like at a really comfortable middle ground where you've got nothing to play for and you've got no interesting narratives. And like Everton were interesting. We all know Everton were interesting last season.
Yeah. Are you saying peril and points deduction pay then in that case? Like I remember it was the Friday night game at Luton, wasn't it? That was the obvious one. And obviously Everton won those 3 games in a week, and it was a little bit awkward for I think Dice referenced it, didn't he, actually himself in the
Calvert-Lewin did. Calvert-Lewin did after the game. We spoke to him after the game and spoke about a load of different things, but he basically started by saying, like, we were all here tonight and the cameras rocked up and they were expecting a relegation battle, and like I think he found it quite funny really that it had all been put to bed, and little jibe at the people who'd obviously selected the game. They all like don't for 1 minute think that players don't and managers don't think about this stuff. They see it all and they're commenting on it just like supporters often are. I'm still like so delighted that was not an important 6 points, because it would have been absolutely horrid. But it does go to show sometimes how certainly when these picks are made a month or two in advance, the broadcasters are looking for very particular fixtures that part of the year, and a lot of it is relegation battle.
Yeah, well, this year there's not a single game left in the Premier League, which is interesting. So it's going to be intriguing to see which way they go there. Let's move on to talk about the second point, because the changes are continuing to go on behind the scene as well, aren't they, mate? In regards to the Freaking group, the recruitment structure we've spoken about a little bit in previous shows. Obviously, Kevin Farwell is going off on his merry way. Angus Knee is coming in and is going to have a bit of a hand to play in that as CEO. And he's bringing some pals with him from Leeds, isn't he?
Yeah. So, I mean, I reported last week, I think it was Thursday, I'm going to say, but don't quote me on that because my memory is like a sieve. Thursday, I reported that Nick Hammond, who I think we've spoken about before on this pod, to be fair, Matt, who's kind of he was engaged as a freelance consultant with Leeds, and obviously therefore knows Kinnear really well. He's in the frame, he's in the box seat for sure to be what they're sort of going to entitle in this new structure as kind of head of trading. And what that means is you're going to have effectively a head of recruitment who's going to be a head of player ID. And at Everton right now, that's Dan Purdy. So Dan Purdy's in line for that player identification role, the scouting. And then you'll have Nick Hammond, somebody separately working with the CEO to actually do the deals with other clubs. So it's a separation between those two elements of the recruitment process. Like at Everton right now, it was often Kevin Thelwell kind of doing both. He'd chair the meeting with the scouting team, and then he'd also go and try and do the deal with Leeds or Newcastle or Leicester or whichever club it was. So that would be separation.
I just had a vision then of like Kevin Fowler being like in his office doing a negotiation deal, or like having the bid accepted, then going, let's take you through into the chief negotiator's office to sort of transfer out. He just gets up and walks out the room and goes into another door with another name tag on.
Yeah. Puts a different plaque on his door. I mean, that
just put a different tie on or a different jacket.
Well, imagine. It's an interesting way of doing it. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. So that will be separated, as I was saying. Nick Hammond in the box seat for that negotiations, trading role, and that will be very, I think, deal centric. Be very focused on the deals. Dan Purdy, player identification. Then I'm trying to think of the other changes that have been reported. I mean, like the thing that occurred to me when I was writing this was that there were still loads of positions up for grabs. I mean, you've got a new head of the women's team, women's CEO, I should say. You've got a new chief commercial officer we reported that is in the process of being, that search is in the process of happening. Nolan Partners, who actually led the search for Kinnear for TFG, they are now looking at a director of football operations. And the director of football operations will sit on that rung below Kinnear and kind of be somebody that certain departments report into. Do you remember when we spoke about like Thelwell had so many different briefs and people reporting into them? They're going to split this up among 2, 3, 4 people. Head of football operations will be one of those. So that is also in process. And it was kind of framed to me that they wanted these in place before the end of the season and work was happening to get it done by May. I still think they're progressing on that score and they're hoping to have stuff done soon. So new hires coming. There'll be a new head of what they call new head of strategy, which is effectively analytics and data. That's going to be an external hire as well, I'm told. So, I mean, it's all change, Matt. Loads of changes coming at the club. And the level below CEO and even CEO itself is going to look very different when you put it together with the board. It feels like a complete refresh at the top of the club.
So from that perspective, then obviously it's a significant change in structure from what Everton had under Kevin Thelwell. Is this just more people as well? Is there just more eyes there to look at more players? Is it more people there to negotiate deals? Is it to sort of just have more ideas and more minds focused on hammering out these finer points in transfers where Everton maybe have lost the step in recent years?
Yeah, I think the transfer process, the way it's outlined now, and obviously we're going to have to wait and see how this happens in practice because it is only theory right now. The way it's been framed right now is that you will have 3 or 4 people around the table, whereas before maybe Kevin Thelwell would have took much more of a decisive role. So there's less power concentrated in the hands of any one person, like a single director of football. And the idea was that in this modern structure, you've got so many different departments and so many different reference points that reporting everyone in, funneling it all in through one person. So the theory goes, means that people have a lot to do and can't focus on areas where they stand out. So I think you'll have more people around the table, certainly in transfer discussions. Like if you imagine that room right now, you'll have Kinnear, who I don't think will necessarily be feeding in on targets. He'll be in the meetings. You'd have Dan Purdy as the head of player ID. You'd have Nick Hammond, should he join as head of trading and negotiations. You'll have your director of football ops. You'll have your your head of strategy. And I mean, the terminology Everton used was a flatter structure. I think that was the terminology they used within the initial press release on Kinnear going and coming in and Thelwell going. Let's see how it plays out, because I always think the power dynamics when people are in place are quite different sometimes, and things can change and not quite be as anticipated. But I think we will see an influx of new faces. I think we will see at times more people in theory round the table than before. And I also think the idea here is that people very much have their own lanes. So like if you're head of player identification, you're just in charge of putting names towards the group and discussing them. If you're head of trading, you know that you're going to go off and negotiate these things. So it's like a clearer, it should be in theory, if it works well, a clearer delineation of power.
Yeah, like that's my main concern with that. Like this setup, I think it's that if those lines do kind of become blurred and the roles feed into one another. Like I like in my head, I just went to like, do you know when you phoning up something and you're trying to get like something like sorted, like your Sky or your internet's gone down, and you just get passed round from person to person to person in that flat management structure, and you're like, just someone just sort it out. Like that's like can't like I when this model doesn't work, like I imagine that's kind of what it's like like no one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like and I know like there's no one sort of take ownership over this situation, but like if it works as you explained there, in the sense that this person has got this role and it's like specific to this situation, and if your player X's agent and you want to find out something about potential transfer or a move, and you know who you need to deal with, like it's obvious who you go to, but it's like if it all because. I think one of the things we spoke about this when it very first got sort of floated, that it was like Angus Kinnear, and then I think you said there was like the 3 sort of different departments underneath him that were going to be kind of split up and working on different aspects. Is there too many cooks going to spoil the broth in that sense? And I suppose like all these situations have, and all these setups have the classic positives and negatives, don't they? But I think in this one, for me, it's just having those roles that are very clearly defined, so that people aren't stepping on each other's toes, which I think is obviously a lot more likely to happen when you've got so many people in different situations. Yeah. But just one more thing I want to say. The one thing that I would say about this, the more I think about it, like I thought that when Fowler was going to go and Everton were going to move away from the direct of the football model, it was going to be sort of I don't want to say it it's not necessarily an old fashioned, but certainly like a step back towards what it was like. Not entirely what it was like when Moyes was at the football club first time, but sort of a regressive step in regards to how, compared to how the rest of the footballing world has gone in terms of their recruitment strategy. But the more like I hear about it, the more it feels like it is still quite modern. It is forward thinking. It does sound like there's good ideas that are progressive here, and there's going to be a lot of smart people feeding into this, which is quite comforting in a way, because I was a bit concerned that if all the power was going to be in Moyes' hands, that in the modern game you can't necessarily do that. So I think the idea of it for me works, but it's just, as you said, it's how it actually works in principle when like in the summer, I'm sure when they're all doing the meetings and they're all talking about who does what, and they have the meet and greet at the Liver Buildings or whatever, and they're having the drink. They're all gonna get on great, and it's all potentially gonna work in theory. But like you said, when those power dynamics start to come through, I think that's where this could potentially get a little bit difficult.
Yeah, and I think we just need to see, as I said, where the kind of the balance of power lies here. Like you, I don't particularly want to see a structure in which everything is done by David Moyes, because I do think that modern football is such that he'll just have far too much on his hands. That's not indictment of David Moyes. It's just the way modern football is. He's not going to be able to do everything, and not at 61 years of age. So you do need to be able to delegate, and you do need to be able to have other people there that you trust in kind of those key positions. I think the really interesting thing here is that in many ways, Everton kind of are swimming against the tide a bit in not having a director of football. If you look at all the other 20 Premier League clubs, most have directors of football or at the very least technical directors. And Everton aren't even going to have a technical director within this structure. So they are, to an extent, moving in the opposite direction. The question I'd ask is, let's say, for argument's sake, Villa have gone back to a pretty old school structure, as I would term it, with Unai Emery basically being the one that runs the club. And certainly transfers, certainly the coaching side. So is it old fashioned? Is it kind of back to the future? Like one of the things that's been mentioned to me is that a lot of good managers, a lot of top managers are actually now requesting more say again. That, like, Moyes' argument has always been, if you listen to him on podcasts, and I think he did something with the overlap on Sky a while ago, but his argument was always like, well, if I live or die by the players that are on the pitch, then I at least need some sort of say in what's taking place here. So, like, I've probably personally been and still am a fan of the director of football model, and Everton are moving away from it. They're trying something different. It's a different setup, similar to, let's say, the one that Villa are using, similar to the ones that others are using, where the manager will have input and say. And I suppose we just need to see how it all shakes down. Like, it's going to be a fascinating case study because you've got a whole squad rebuild that needs to take place with a new structure, and that new structure is not going to be in place in its entirety until May, early June. So, like, there's going to be so much to do, and we're going to learn a lot of lessons very quickly, I think.
Yeah, like the last thing I'll say on this, like, it feels like to use like a football example, it feels like losing the player that does everything, like losing your star player that does like the goals and the assists. And then instead of going out and signing a direct replacement for that player, you go and try and do the thing where you share the goals around and you get 3 or 4 different players to come in who... the one that's just come into my mind, then I hope it doesn't go like this, is when we lost Rom and we got Rooney, Sigurdsson, Klaassen, Vlasic. I'm like, we'll just share the goals around. It's going to be fine. And we'll get Giroud as well, and it'll be laughing. But do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like... Yeah. It feels like that. Like, we're not going to... Again, weird. I'm not comparing Kevin Fowler. I'm not saying Kevin Fowler is as good a director of football as Lukaku was a striker, but he did a lot of important stuff at Everton in that regard. And it feels like I said, instead of going and getting a direct replacement for him, we're gonna share the goals around in the executive rooms and stuff like that. With that weird metaphor, left and never readdressed again. Let's talk about some absolutely cracked about any footy. Let's talk about some footy, Paddy. Are we going to beat the Reds on Wednesday, do we think?
What a question to open with there for the Derby preview section.
Yeah, come on. I mean, there's no pressure on us whatsoever, is there?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, to me, living in the city and obviously speaking to family members who are Evertonians, friends who are Liverpool fans, this feels like it should have had a 2.5 week build-up, but it feels like it's still quite low-key. And I wonder how much of that is this sense from the Liverpool side and from other club side that it's basically done at the top of the table. Everton, if they needed to go to Anfield to get a win or a result to stay up potentially, then they'd be looking at this game in a very different way. And a lot of the table feels like it's kind of being resolved, apart from that area between 3rd and 8th, 9th. And therefore, maybe it's not being as, and this is just my opinion, it doesn't feel as kind of hotly anticipated, this game, as some others. And that is strange because you had Liverpool going for the league, you've got Everton resurgent under Moyes, looking forward to hopefully a brighter future. You've got a 2-week window between games. In that first derby, obviously, loads of people's heads fell off when Decore ran over and celebrated in front of Liverpool fans. Like, the carry-on was like something I've never seen before. So, like, I imagine that will actually come to the surface on the day of the game. But I don't know about you. Like, for now, for me, it feels a bit low-key for a Merseyside derby.
Yeah, like, I think they're in a weird position at the moment, in the sense that obviously they're all made up they're going to win the league, but I think there is a little bit of an undercurrent they're a bit gutted because I think they thought they were going to do something extraordinary this season in the sense of winning a cup and maybe going for the Champions League as well. And they've obviously lost both of them and have had this 2.5 week break. And like it's weird, but like it almost feels like it's a bit flat for them at the moment. I'm sure when they start winning games again and pick it up and they have the parade, they'll be buzzing obviously and rightly so. But it just feels like they're in a bit of a flat, and all the stuff going on with Alexander-Arnold and Salah and Van Dijk as well. It just sort of feels like they've got this great thing coming up, but there's a lot of sort of things hanging over them at the moment until they get there.
A lot of momentum, and like I actually don't think it would take much, probably an Everton win, for things to really start to get a bit frantic and a bit. And a bit worried over there. I mean,
I love the way you said it wouldn't take much, and Everton win at Anfield in front of supporters.
There we go.
Happens all the time. That so
newfound optimism from the recent 9-game unbeaten streak. I mean, like because of all the factors you mentioned, and because of their cup loss to Newcastle, the fact they went out of the Champions League to PSG. I think an Everton victory here, and this slightly contradicts some of what I was saying, but an Everton victory here, I think really does put the cat amongst the pigeons at Anfield, because all of a sudden then they're on a bad spell, a really sustained bad spell, not something they've snapped out of after the break. And I think lingering doubts then will start to creep in. It's like, are we making a mess of this? Could we make a mess of this? And that's where you start to have the doubt. That's where you start to have the stress, I think, inside the stadium that kind of permeates down onto the players. So if that were to happen, and I still don't think it's the most likely result on Wednesday, but if that were to happen, then I actually think it'd be really interesting to see the fallout. And I'm also just anyway interested to see what happens with Alexander-Arnold on Wednesday, like what kind of reception he gets.
He's injured, isn't he? He's injured.
Yeah, but he'll attend the game though, surely.
Do you reckon they'll have him in the crowd like Van Dijk during the COVID one, where they were going to try and wheel him out on the pitch after the win?
It was like a scene from Little Britain, that wasn't
it? My big hope for the game, Paddy, is that we finally get to see what was on the banner that they tried to get out of Goodison, and they couldn't do it. It was upside down. They got it. Bless them. They tried the little hearts out, but they just couldn't get the great Goodison banner out over the away end. And then I think a steward came along and just snatched it off them, didn't he? So maybe we'll finally get to see what that no doubt really witty banner has to say. Do you think they'll bring it out for the Anfield one?
Maybe. I mean, I'm sure they'll have something in store for us on Wednesday night. I mean, like,
it's always dead funny, to be fair.
Maybe. I mean, like I say, I think Everton have not really got much to lose here.
No,
really not got much to lose. Like the position in the table's consolidated. They've done really well the last few months to pull themselves well away from danger. And like obviously losing a Merseyside Derby would hurt. It always hurts. But when you're free from the pressures of the league table, I think hopefully that should give you a bit of extra license.
Yeah,
I think we can go there with like kind of a weight lifted, knowing that relegation's not the issue, and hopefully look to cause them some problems. And I do think going back to the first game, Beto played really well against Van Dijk and Konate. Probably one of his best all-round performances for Everton. Thought he bullied them a little bit. I think Everton definitely visibly perturbed and irritated Liverpool at times in that game and caused them a lot of problems. Like the game finished 2-2, and I think 2-2 was probably a fair reflection, just about. But it was more a 2-2 that flattered Liverpool, I think, than a 2-2 that flattered Everton. Like if anybody was going to win it, it probably should have been Everton on the balance of chances and play and whatever else. That's got to give Everton confidence, even though it's at Anfield and there's good manager, good players on the pitch, and players starting to come back. So I think you've got to attack it and just give it a good go and see what happens.
Yeah, just very quickly. Obviously, we haven't had Moyes' press conference yet, so we don't know about Mykolenko or Njai or McNeil, or obviously good news on the lads who've seen them back in training. But who's your left back and who's your left midfielder on Wednesday night?
So the left back, Am I allowed to include Mikolenko or not?
Well, do you think he's going to be fit? I doubt he'll be fit based on nothing other than what I've read from his coach and himself during the international break.
Yeah, I mean, on the balance of logic, the fact that he went off during the international break and wasn't in any of the training images that we saw from Everton tends to suggest that he is a doubt, and I would suggest probably a significant doubt for that game. The decision then, let's say Mikolenko was ruled out, I think the decision then becomes Ashley Young or Seamus Coleman as a left back, or you do something really dramatic and shift somebody like Branthwaite to the left, bring Jake O'Brien inside and play another right back as well. I think that latter option is probably less likely for Moyes just because it amounts to 3 changes rather than 1. So I think like if it's not Mikolenko, it's probably Ashley Young, isn't it? And what you're saying to Young is your stronger foot's your right. In theory, you're defending on your stronger foot when Salah comes inside. And if you have to show him the byline on his weaker fit foot, then do it all day. And that's fine. We'll take that. So that's probably the one there. Left midfield's interesting. And I think it kind of has to be because McNeil and Dias are only just back in training. I don't think they can start the game. And I'm not even sure if necessarily they'll be ready to come off the bench in such a high intensity match. So therefore, you're probably looking at Harrison or Lindstrom, aren't you? I don't like this.
Well, it was Alcaraz, wasn't it, against West Ham?
Yeah, but I don't think that went well enough for it to be used again.
Okay, I thought he was all right from what I've seen. Well, I've seen the whole game, but
I mean, like I think he's a good player, and I think definitely like to see him on the pitch. Certainly later in the game, running at that Liverpool defence with tired legs, I think he can cause real damage there. Probably the first time in a while Everton have had a player who carries the ball like that from a central area and can pose a threat on the counter. My concern with the Mikolenko thing is that I think this new Moyes system, where O'Brien kind of shuttles into the back 3, shuttles inside at times, and then sometimes plays as a right back as well. I think that's quite dependent on the guy on the other side, in this case Mikolenko, pushing pretty high up the pitch and providing some width, just so more than anything else, crosses coming into the box, and just so that the left midfielder, whoever that is, isn't completely outnumbered against his opposite number. So actually, Mikolenko being injured, I think forces like a bit of a dilemma for Moyes. Should he be ruled out? Because I don't think Everton have really got. Ashley Young couldn't do the same job. Dwight McNeil probably could, but he's not going to be ready right now, and he's not as good, anywhere near as good defensively as Mikolenko anyway. So could we see something where actually you end up with Young playing deeper and Jake O'Brien's pushed on a little bit more? I don't know, but it kind of feels as though it disturbs the balance a bit more than it should do, just because of the fact that Mikolenko's a left footer.
Oh, it's nice to talk about actual footy, though, isn't
it? Football and not accounts or
lovely.
Whatever else.
Even ahead of a derby, I'm feeling good. But yeah, we will wrap it up there. We're going to the pub on Thursday, so if we win or we get a good draw on Wednesday, we might do something on Wednesday night. We'll see how it goes. Might be a little byline bonus. So yeah, that's it from us. We are sponsored by the Bridewell. That's where we're going on Thursday to have a drink and discuss plans. Do head down there the weekend if you get a chance after the Arsenal game. If you watch us on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe. Do leave us a comment on anything we discussed today. Who's your left back and who's your left winger for the big game at Anfield on Wednesday night? Has any thoughts on anything to do with the accounts as well that came out earlier on today and those changes behind the scenes? Maybe listening to us, do leave us a rate and do leave us a review. And yeah, if you kind enough to sponsor me with the London Marathon, the link is in the description as well. But yeah, that's been the Everton Bar. Paddy, oh my gosh, I almost forgot. We haven't done numbers.
I thought you were going to skip it today and just say, you know what, we've done our derby chat. I'm going to, for 1 week only, skip by the number.
Well, to be honest, the reason I forgot is because it's not a great crop. Let's very quickly go through them. Are there any of these you want to talk about? Number 35, Eldin Jakubovic, Dennis
No.
Adeniran, Tyus
No.
Browning, Conor McElhaney. I almost saw him score a wonder goal at Arsenal.
I feel like we've done Conor McElhaney chat before and mentioned that Arsenal goal.
Yeah. Didn't score, did he?
No,
Near goal.
Near.
Kieran Agard, great striking hope from yesteryear.
No, this is not a bumper crop, is it?
I mean, this is a great trifecta of keepers. Paul Gerrard, Thomas Myra, Steve Simonson.
Paul Gerrard still gives me the shivers now. Like, he was the first goalkeeper I really saw growing up watching Everton, and he always had at least one clanger in him.
You can't go for a walk when Gary McAllister's about to have a shot.
The free kick was also taken about 15 yards further forward than it should have been. But I also, to be fair, blame Everton for that as well, because you've got to be stood over it and
It tends to be like good goalkeeper practice that if someone's going to have a shot at goal and you're the goalie, don't just walk away from the goal.
Like, but I would never, in my head, think that Paul Gerrard was a good example of goalkeeping practice.
No, that's fair.
Like, Myra had a ricket in him, obviously, but not as many, I would say, as Gerrard. The only other one there that I think is quite interesting is Tyus Browning, who has gone on to play for the Chinese national team and win the Chinese Super League. He's had a good career.
Yeah.
Done well for himself. It's not a very well-travelled route, that kind of the Everton Academy to Chinese Super League and Chinese national team, but he obviously had Chinese ancestry amongst other things. He was qualified to play for 3 or 4 countries and has taken his chance pretty well. So I think out of all the stories there, I think he's the most interesting. But I just wanted to have a moment about Paul Gerrard, the goalkeeper, as well.
Well, and just to finish on a nice Derby note, and not Gary McAllister's goal, Tyus Browning played a bit of a role, didn't he, in that Jagielka volley all those years ago? He did a great run down the right hand side and put a cross in, and I think it comes back out and Jagielka lashes it in. But I think he played his part in. I don't even think it was a pre-assist, but he did well. He did a good bit of running and passing in the build-up to that.
Maybe the same's going to happen on Wednesday night, but this time it'll be another central being a fullback. Jake O'Brien getting to the byline. Cross comes in.
Tarkowski's only scored a wonder goal against Liverpool this season. It's all coming together.
So you never know. There's your omen, your Everton byline omen for the Merseyside derby.
And the last one is John Hills.
Yeah, not much to say about John Hills, to be honest. So
if you know anything about any of those players or John Hills, you can also email us. I've been terrible with these things today. Email us at evertonbyline@gmail.com. I'm just so excited for the Merseyside derby. Yeah, it's evertonbyline@gmail.com. You've got to get in touch with us, as many people have over the past couple of weeks. So cheers for your emails. I will wrap it up there now. That's been your Everton Byline. Up the Toffees. We'll speak to you again soon.